Hey, gang, we are back again with Mark Collinsworth, the CIO, the Chief Investment Officer of Ver Global, and the guy of the hour to talk to right now with all the worries about finances going on. First, Mark, Trump's tariffs that he's pushing hard for, will they work, or will it, as his detractors say, it's just going to be an impact on the economy? Will they work, and will they be successful, and how much of a hurt will consumers take?
Thank you, Larry. First, I don't think the tariffs are going to hurt the economy that much. If you look at places like, let's say Canada, Mexico, Europe, their economy gets about 30% of their economy is based on us, whereas about only 1 to 2% of our economy is based on theirs. So if you're going to put tariffs on someone, their economies are going to hurt a whole lot more than the United States. And as we've already seen, a lot of these countries, if they build their factories here in the United States, they won't get those tariffs on it. So I think as more of those companies come here to the United States and build their factories and build those products here, it'll create jobs and hopefully lower inflation.
But won't there be a gap between the time the companies want to move back to the U.S. and by time the new factories and facilities are built?
There will be a gap, but that's the wonderful thing about the economy. The economy is always trying to forecast things in the future. So things that are happening today in the economy really are things that are happening in the future. It's kind of like, when you had the 2008 recession, people didn't really feel the 2008 recession. Even though Wall Street was feeling it much earlier, people didn't actually feel it until much later down the road.
Okay, but for instance, let's say that there is a widget factory that's going to move back to the U.S., but that's going to take at least a year to build the factory, at least a year. In the
Mhm.
meantime, since we have tariffs on widgets from a foreign country, consumers will be paying more for their widgets for at least a year, correct?
Well, theoretically, but that's also kind of an interesting thing that's going on right now. If you look at, let's say, Europe, for example, or even China, they're cutting their interest rates and they're trying to force their currencies down. So if you put a let's say a 15% tariff on somebody and they drive their currency down 15%, technically there's not really a tariff anymore because the currency basically absorbed it.
Right. So, the big elephant in the room is really China, because so much of our products are imported from China. And Trump is going easy on China. He's not talking about such stiff tariffs. So if if he increases the tariffs on China substantially, that's going to affect like 80, 90% of the of domestic consumption of products from China, correct?
Right. I think that's why he's not going hot and heavy after China because so many of our cheap goods do come from there. Whereas the goods coming from Europe is more like, he's put the tariffs on like aluminum, steel, stuff like that. So he's helping the industrial manufacturing section of the United States, but he's trying not to hurt the service sector, which is we get most of our service goods from China.
Well, so eventually, will we be able to replace China's products with domestic manufacturing once again as it once was?
Well, I don't think we'll ever get near that for the simple reason the government has put so many regulations in there. If you go and buy a product, an employee's health insurance, 401k plans, unemployment insurance, all that's priced into the price of that product. So you're really essentially paying for the person's health care and 401k plan. In China, they don't have that. So they're able to, they have no minimum wage. So they can have people working for, $1 an hour versus here you have to pay at least what, depending on what state, 10, $14 an hour.
Yeah. So are you saying then that we're never really going to be able to replace China's uh, imports with our own domestic manufacturing to any large extent?
Correct, just because all those regulations the government puts on the consumer here is actually paying for all those regulations and healthcare, and that you don't have that problem in China.
Okay, but since there's so many products that we use that come from China, how will that restore domestic manufacturing? If so much of it already comes from China and we can't really do much to stop that, then what's the incentive for domestic factories to produce the same products that we're now getting from China cheaply?
Well, I don't think the U.S. companies will really be producing um, that much. A lot of that business will probably come here. So, like this is one of the problems that the stock market's facing right now is so many companies build their factories in China and they sell those, but they, let's say a Nike or somebody, they build it in China and they ship it back over here. If they do that, they're going to end up having to pay a tariff on. So U.S. companies are going to end up paying foreign tariffs. Those U.S. companies right now are debating should they bring those factories and build them here in the United States, or should they ride it out for 4 more years, hoping that a Democrat gets in office 4 years down the road.
Yeah. Well, overall, though, Mark, you think the tariffs will work and it will be a benefit to the U.S. consumer. How much of a benefit?
It will probably be noticeable, but just by a little bit. I don't think it'll be any kind of like, shock and awe on the tariffs. But as we've already seen, when Trump goes out and puts a tariff on one of these countries, they usually want to sit down and have negotiations and things like that. And since some of these retaliatory tariffs just started here in the last 24 to 48 hours, I'm going to be very curious to see what happens 30 days out from now when the prime ministers in those countries are just getting pounded by the consumers saying, hey, we cannot we're losing our products there. Interesting thing. Did you know that Canada buys 87% of its toilet paper from the United States?
I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised. Procter and
Yeah. So
Gamble is in the area where I live, but as a matter of fact.
yeah, so Trump should just say, let's put a tariff on uh toilet paper and really put the pressure on Canada.
Yeah, well, but but again, what I'm saying is, Mark, with less incentive, despite tariffs for companies to move a lot of the operations back here, how much of the reconstruction of the American industrial base will actually occur?
Well, are you talking about manufacturing industrial strength? I don't think we'll ever get that back. The only thing I think is going to really help the United States is going to create jobs here. But we'll never get back to the industrial powerhouse that we used to be back in like the 1950s.
Which industries will blossom more here with the tariffs?
Anything that deals with manufacturing, the Rust Belt, primarily, probably if I had to guess, cars and steel producers will probably benefit the most.
And apparently, the chip company is investing here rather than just staying in Taiwan, correct?
Well, correct. And a large portion of that is Taiwan, like Taiwan Semiconductor is building their factories here because if China ever decided to invade Taiwan, the thing that they're going after wouldn't be in Taiwan, it'd be in the United States.
Okay, so Mark, we're wrapping it up now. Um, you don't think the tariffs are going to have a tremendous boost on the economy? So therefore, in the next few years, or maybe even 5, 10 years down the road, what are we heading into? Is it going to be, a golden era again, like Trump is claiming, like he's predicting, or will we just be holding our own and maybe doing a little better than we have been doing for the last 20 years or so?
If I had to guess, because we've taken on so much debt, I would say the golden era will be we might do a little bit better, but we won't be doing fantastic. And if I had to really narrow it down on the golden age, I would probably say that has to do more with conservatism. As you've probably seen, a lot more people are joining the military these days because they have that patriotism, and conservatism is actually on the rise, whereas liberalism, if that's what you want to call it, is actually on the decline.
That's more like a cultural reinvigoration, return to
Correct.
previous cultural standards.
Yeah, kind of like when Reagan came in and he kind of revitalized the conservative movement. I think that's what Donald Trump, that will be the golden age. Donald Trump does is he will revitalize the conservative movement. But as for economic bliss and stuff like we saw in like the 1990s, I don't think we'll see that.
All right, so what's the effect then on this moderate recovery in terms of the U.S. being the key uh, nation that is able to call the shots, or even for our own national security? I mean, are we going to have the same type of security militarily that we used to?
And that's really what we have. That's really, I guess, our golden parachute there is, if you take the 10 largest militaries in the world and you add up all of their budgets, it takes the 10 largest militaries in the world to equal our budget. So we're kind of like the peacekeepers. A lot of people we do deals with say, hey, we're going to go and guard your country and stuff like that. So the military might is really what we do. I mean, think about it. 27% of our GDP goes into the military.
And that won't be rivaled by China, which is already building up its military to a tremendous
Well,
amount.
it is building up it is building up its military a whole lot, but they're still way behind us right now. But if they're going like in the past several years, they've doubled the size of their military. You keep doubling it, eventually you're going to catch up to the United States.
So therefore, China will catch up.
If at the current pace they're going, yes, here in the next probably 5 to 7 years, they will have a military just as large as ours.
Okay, so if they equal us or perhaps even surpass us, what happens to us? China controls the world. China controls the economy, politics. What will happen?
Well, I think China I don't think China wants to hurt the global economy. China wants all that money coming into them.
Right.
But speaking of the military, I find this fascinating. Did you know that China owns so much U.S. debt, the interest payments off the debt that we pay to the Chinese for the money that they've loaned us actually pays for 100% of their military right now at this point?
Incredible. And that's not easily corrected.
No, so we're basically funding with the interest payments, we're basically funding China's military's growth right now.
So wrapping up, Mark, are you saying that the golden age of America is already over and will not return?
Oh yeah, we've the second our debt got basically when our debt level surpassed our GDP, we were pretty much game over because we have more debt than the entire value of our economy is.
So we're going to be a diminished nation militarily, economically, politically, et cetera, et cetera.
Correct, unless we have like during World War, the Great Depression, unless we have a major war that really kickstarts the economy and we grow our way out of it. That's the only way I can see that happening.
But yeah, with China being the big bear now, the bigger bear growing even more so than Russia, I mean, what's the chances of us even winning a major war?
I don't know. I sat in some military classes on the strategy to defeat China if we ever went to war with China. Um, we have some tricks up our sleeves to really lay it down hard on.
I know you have a military background, so perhaps you have some data that speaks of the U.S. holding its own.
Well, yeah, if we went to a full scale land war right now, I would say China might be lucky to hold out maybe 60 days.
Wow, that's
But at one point, I say 60 days now. I remember at one point it was 15 days.
not really. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. All right. Well, Mark Collinsworth, the CIO, the Chief Investment Officer of Vera Global, thanks for being with us. And we'll be continuing these segments with Mark with all the stuff going on economically, all the worries, all the predictions and the counter predictions. So we'll be talking to you again soon, Mark. Thanks.
All right. Thank you.